Outlaws, criminals, cutthroats. These outcasts were united under the magic barrier. While some became part of an authoritarian leadership, ruling with an iron fist, others turned to a life of devotion, blinded by empty promises by a dark presence. But there were some who never changed, who stayed loyal to their cause. Even when the magic dome dissipated, they stood as one. Bound by their camaraderie, they beat the odds under the leadership of a man who once led the human armies into battle. Welcome to the Gothic lore series, in which we will dive into the world and history of our favorite game. Since Gothic underwent several retcons, retroactive changes in the continuity of the story, we will also speculate a bit about certain topics. Today, we are going to have a look at the Mercenaries, the brave survivors who found their place after they abandoned the colony. In the southeast of Khorinis, one stumbles upon a great farmland. Surrounded by mountains and lush forests in which wild beasts roam, this area is almost secluded from the rest of the island. Small dales are inhabited by bandits and even trolls, while caves nearby are home to ghastly goblins. In the forests of the east, in the shade of old oaks, where the singing of birds is but a distant sound, the rattling of bones and steel can be heard clearly. Deep in the woods, the dead have arisen to wander the earth once more. Unexperienced adventurers should be careful stalking this underbrush. Just one moment of carelessness could mean their certain doom. Out of all places, they should avoid the ancient crypt. Here, the rattling of bones seems to be the loudest. The northern parts, behind Sekep's farm, are inhabited by a vast array of beasts. Among them are creatures like bloodflies and wolves, but also snappers, wargs, and the most dangerous animal of them all, a shadow beast. Only a stone's throw away to the west, one can find an old graveyard where dead trees, withering plants, and disgusting roots creep out of the ground. At night, distant growls and moans echo through the air, and the field workers avoid that place at all costs. Deep in the woods, a woman called Sagitta dwells in a cave. She is the local herb witch, usually despised by the peasants, but appreciated once they fall ill. South of Onar's farm, a path leads up the rugged mountainside, and high above the logging camp, ex-convicts and lawless bandits under the lead of the former Shadow Dexter set up camp, waiting for new orders of their master Raven. They keep hiding in these mountains, where once upon a time ore was mined. Scraping and other unsettling noises emit from these deep places, but the two adits that still remain are closed off. In the western part of the general area, a plateau with green pastures can be found. It is here where the mountain pass to the former prison colony is located. The nearby farm is run by Bengar, a mere tenant leasing the fertile soil, but the fields are in Onar's possession. A source of water up in the mountains by the plateau gives birth to waterfalls and rivers flowing into the region, creating a lake nearby which provides drinkable water that can be used to douse the plants on the fields. The headquarters of the Mercenaries is located on the main farm. The Old Manor is the main base of their operations. While Onar and his family reside in the left wing of the building, the Mercenaries live in the right wing. The southern building is a big barn which was converted into a dormitory for the peasants. The northern building is a canteen where peasants and mercenaries would rest and eat after a long day's work. Behind the main structures, a small chapel can be found, a quiet place for contemplation and prayer. Right next to it, the remains of 2 shacks can be seen, burnt to the ground with smoke still rising. They met their demise not that long ago. For 3 generations, the farmland is in possession of Onar's family. The patriarch is a grim elderly man, a businessman nonetheless, who lives in the manor with his wife Maria and his daughter Eleanor. His land is vast and his fields are profitable, and 2 smaller farmers, namely Sekop in the north and Benga on the plateau in the south, leased parts of his land. Onar accumulated a lot of riches in the past years. The deals he struck with the city of Corinus, and maybe even with the king himself regarding the supply for the colony, appeared to be fruitful. And yet things changed once the magic barrier was destroyed, and the paladins of the king arrived on Corinus. With so many new mouths to feed, the militia was sent out to collect more and more goods from the farmlands. While the farmers Arkil and Lobard had no other choice but to cooperate, them being the closest ones to the city, the other farmers steadily began to revolt against the militia and their paladin overlords, refusing to pay tribute. The militia, however, got brazen in these times, even stealing from Onar himself. One particular item of interest was a golden plate, a gift his wife Maria got at their wedding. With the situation escalating quickly, rescue was on the way, without Onar expecting it. A few years prior, a covenant between Lee, the Royal Army's former commander, and the Circle of Water under the lead of Saturas separated themselves from the old camp, not willing to serve Gomez and the king. They created the new camp, the second settlement inside the barrier, to live in relative peace. With the water mages working on an escape plan, Lee and his trusty men were hired to protect them at all cost. United by one cause, to finally get out of this prison, they worked together for at least 6 years. When the sleeper finally got banished and the magic barrier ceased to exist, Lee led his men out of the colony. It is not clear if the Circle of Water traveled alongside the mercenaries, but they ended up on Corinus and agreed to investigate the case of the missing citizens and research the earthquakes that plagued this land. The warriors under Lee split from the magicians and made their way to Onar's farm. Even though they went separate ways, some mercenaries were still loyal to the water mages after years of protecting them. Onar, after weeks of harassment from the militia and the increasing demands of the paladins, saw his chance to finally put an end to it. Without hesitation, he struck a deal with Lee. Shelter and fair pay for Lee and his men, for a solid protection from the king's loyalists. And so, an unlikely alliance was shaped. While most citizens despised and even hated the convicts who fled the prison, Onar cherished the arrival of these battle-hardened fighters. The relationship between Onar's farmstead and the city tensed up, and it seemed that any misstep could lead to an outright civil war. But it weren't only convicts who became part of Onar's men. Later on, mysterious figures hailing from the south joined Onar's forces, much to the dismay of Lee and his fellow warriors. Silvio, their leader, a strong and devious individual, brought a whole new mentality to the farm. While Lee was thoughtful and cunning, Silvio was the complete opposite. The former commander planned to use the uncertain nature of the paladins and Onar's conflict to force a truce and amnesty for him and his men to set sail to the mainland, taking revenge on the high officials of the royal court. Silvio, on the other hand, wanted the conflict to escalate, lusting for battle and planning to plunder the farms close to the city. This scenario created a schism between the mercenaries. Once the nameless hero arrived and set things in motion, this dynamic would quickly dissolve. Rescuing the mercenaries' blacksmith from the paladins, he, with the help of the magicians, fixed the Eye of Innos and prepared himself to fight the draconic masters in the old Valley of Mines. At that point in time, rumors about dragons spread, and the mercenaries of both groups wanted to take part in the hunt for treasures. Outfitted by the blacksmith Bennett, they called themselves Dragonhunters and made their way into the colony. On their way, they met shady individuals who also desired the riches guarded by the fearsome overlords. Silvio met his doom when he fought the Nameless One after his success over the ice dragon Fincrack, but the division between the mercenary groups didn't end. When the battle against Beliar's evil forces intensified, and it was clear that the halls of Ildorath held the key to the triumph over the Dark Hordes, Lord Hagen granted the Nameless One access to the Paladin's ship. Assembling his crew, he took Lee and some other mercenaries with him, while the rest of those brave warriors stayed on Khorinis. Onar's farm was by all means self-sufficient. They had access to fresh water, fertile fields to grow all kinds of crops, a lot of sheep for wool and meat, and excellent hunting grounds in the nearby forests. All these goods were once traded with the city, and probably with the monastery as well, amassing a lot of riches which made Onar a very powerful and important man on the island. Now that the trade with the city has ceased, they only sell their wares to visitors. It is not clear if they still negotiate with the Magicians of Fire or even the tavern. While the peasants make up the majority of the farmlands, the mercenaries are the second largest group. Their main purpose is to keep the militia from plundering the farms, but they also have other responsibilities like keeping the beasts at bay which get too close to the livestock. Many armor designs of the new camp have been adopted. Their mostly asymmetrical and rugged style emphasizes the rough nature of the warrior's origin. The light armor has a leather jacket with fur embroidered on it, which is worn over a simple textile tunic or shirt. The left arm is protected by a bracer made of studded leather. The right arm, however, is protected completely by metal plates fixed on a layer of leather. A strap with a metal plate and additional spikes serving as some form of shoulder protection is worn across the upper body. The trousers are also quite simple. Leather and fur only offer slight defenses against any attack. The medium armor is also asymmetrical. Most of the upper torso is clad in metal. A big layered pauldron protects the right shoulder, a smaller one the left. The breast harness consists of one ornamented round plate held in position with steel straps, shielding vital organs. Additional furs are incorporated into the plate. Studded leather braces are worn on the forearms, and the legs are kept safe by plated leather chaps. All the high-ranking mercenaries have different duties. The former General Lee led the remaining forces of the new camp to Khorinis and struck a deal with Onar. Now planning their getaway from the island, he carefully considers his options to get amnesty for him and his loyal warriors. Torloth, the old sea dog, who served him under the barrier, is now in charge of rookies, sending them on their missions and training them. Karlad is the quartermaster, selling weapons of fine quality. Although he arrived with Silvio, his true allegiance lies with Lee. Cord is another example. He was the sword master back in the days of the barrier, and now continues teaching the art of war on the farm. The heavy armor, worn by those in higher ranks, has a symmetrical style and rich ornamentation, which makes it stand out among the other mercenaries. The breastplate with a visage engraved on it covers the whole upper body. Big layered pauldrons protect both shoulders, and again fur is used to keep the wearer warm and emphasizes the characteristic aesthetic. Steel gloves reinforced with studded leather defend the fighter from glancing blows, and the legs are protected by leather chaps and embellished steel plates, an improvement over the medium armor. When it comes to weapons, the mercenaries fought with whatever they personally preferred. Some using two-handed swords, some one-handed axes or maces. Speaking about ranged weapons, however, it seems that most use the bow instead of the crossbow. Looking at the other factions, it is clear that paladins and magicians of fire have naturally a higher rank than the militia and novices, but observing the situation at Onar's farm, things are quite different. The Dragonhunters, even though their armor is way more powerful than those worn by the regular mercenaries, are not superior to Lee. They can be seen as a semi-splinter group, with some of them originating from Onar's men, others hailing from the south, and some even coming from the mainland. They don't have an internal leader, and the bunch got divided pretty early on, creating multiple subgroups. Most of them didn't want to ally with Silvio. His harsh and arrogant approach, treating his fellow hunters like his servants, was mainly the reason. Ferros and Jan, for example, separated themselves and fought their way into the fortress in the valley, now under control of the paladins. Cypher and Rod have set up camp near Cavalon's old hut, where, deep within the new swamp area, a dragon is believed to dwell. Kurgan, Godar, Kjorn and Biff can be found at the pass to Corinis, but shortly after, they depart to a cave close to the old mine. Silvio and his right-hand Bulko, eager to fight the strongest dragon of them all, Finkrag, left for the ice-covered region that was once the new camp. While the paladins band together, no matter what, the Dragonhunters have no sense of unity and go separate ways. It is therefore hard to see them as one coherent unit. The Dragonhunters' armor is made of many different materials, but the main ones are leather, steel, chainmail, and dragon scales. The hauberk is the first layer of protection, while a surcoat of leather reaches down to the upper legs. The for the series characteristic large collar serves as a shoulder and torso protection, while arms are clad in hardened leather. The light armor looks very tight and has a slender frame. It seems that it barely restricts the fighter's movement. The boots and the thighs are protected by studded leather. The collar of the medium armor is bigger and thicker, pointing upwards. The slender frame is gone, and it gained a significant bulk. Additional layers of leather on the upper arms, a longer surcoat reaching to the knees, and the saggy textile covering the boots makes it resemble a samurai armor in a weird way. The headwear resembles a bassinet, with spikes on top, an open-faced combat helmet which seems to be worn with a metal coif. The heavy armor has basically the same model, with a few small additions and fancy ornaments and accessories. The plate collar is straightened, the leather has more studs, the boots are reinforced with metal plates, and 2 claws, consisting of 2 blades each, are added on top of the gloves. The helmet remains unchanged. The first bit of speculation is about the garments of the Dragonhunters. They are made by Bennett, the master blacksmith on Onar's farm. What is so baffling about it is that dragon scales are required to craft the medium and the heavy armor. We see a lot of these armors worn, for example, by Håkorn, Kurgan, or Silvio. This begs the question, where did they get the scales from? I highly doubt that they slew these creatures. It is understandable that the developers gave them different armors for more visual variety, but lore-wise, it doesn't make any sense. On top, we get the first armor for free if we are part of the Mercenaries. That either means that Bennett has a secret stash of scales somehow, Or the first armor doesn't require any of these, which would make more sense. The next question is about the origins of the Dragonhunters. We already know that some come from Onar's farm, but the others come from all sorts of places. Feroz in the fortress in the valley tells us that he is from the mainland. As a refugee, he escaped the war-torn Metana and arrived on Khorinis. Then there is Silvio, Bulko, Rod, Sentenza, Raoul, and Fester. Not that long ago, they were part of another mercenary band fighting against the orcs in the south. It is never really specified where that exactly is. The south could mean the Southern Isles, or maybe even Verant, but why didn't they say so? Is this ominous south actually on Khorinis? It is quite strange that this location is kept so vague. Them fighting on Khorinis makes no sense. We would have heard about mercenaries who fought orcs. Verant? That is pretty far away, but still possible. My best guess is that they come from the Southern Isles, but we don't know much about that place if we stick with the information that we can get in the first 2 entries of the series. Now let's talk about the origins of Kjorn, Håkern, Godar, Bith, and Kurgan. This is very interesting, to say the least. If we talk to Kjorn at the beginning of chapter 4, he tells us that they come from the city. Obviously, that is a lie, but the German version hints at the truth he was about to say. I quote, "Wir kommen aus den... sind aus der Stadt." Roughly translated, that means, we come from, the city. The English language is a bit general when using a linguistic article, since the is the only one existing. German is a bit more complicated when using articles, but also more precise. This gives us a strong hint what he wanted to say, which is "Wir kommen aus den Bergen." So, we come from the mountains. This is mighty interesting in my opinion. We heard about these fabled mountains time and time again.
I bet that a few of the bandits from the mountains have shown up as well by now to get a free meal.
We've been planning to get away to the mountains and away from the town and all those who live there.
Where do you come from? I've joined up with some men from the mountains.
Godar talks about them. Gunnar, Marleth, and Elrich bring them up as well. This might sound very mundane to most people, but the existence of regions never seen and far off the well-traveled roads of Khorinis is very exciting to me. The mountains is a very broad term. When Maleth talks about those, he is referring to the area surrounding Xardus Tower, where we eventually find Brago and his thugs. When Gunnar or Elena talk about it, they could very well mean the region where Dexter's hideout is located. We also know for a fact that Yarkandar is isolated from the rest of the island by a massive mountain range. I think what makes this so exciting to me is the possibilities of the future. With Gothic 1 being remade, there could be hope for them tackling the second part next. Just imagine the whole of Khorinis, no loading times, as one big island with many new places in between them. It might also be food for thought in terms of modding. I love the Liver mod, extending the areas of Khorinis in a logical way that also feels natural. Nevertheless, I think that the mountains of Khorinis are a dangerous place, full of bandits, orcs, and maybe even ancient ruins ready to be explored. And here we are again, at the end of another entry in the Gothic lore series. I hope you liked our little excursion to the farmlands of Khorinis, among the brave warriors led by Lee. If you have any additions, questions, or ideas, please let me know in the comments. Now, let's head into the canteen and eat some of Tekla's good old stew.